playing the role of Joseph Welch at yesterday's Kavanaugh hearing. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who had quite the moment, quite the soliloquy in this Shakespearean farce that we witnessed yesterday.
It was a moment of his lifetime. I mean, who knew Southern Strong would be so effective?
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me. You've got nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsey said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham, that you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are. God, I hate to say it because these have been my friends. But let me tell you, when it comes to this, you're looking for a fair process. You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend.
Clearly, and Graham
Mess with the wrong guy.
Graham had a message for his Republican colleagues in the Senate, on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Hey, Flake, listen up.
To my Republican colleagues, if you vote no, you're legitimizing the most despicable thing I have seen in my time in politics. You want this seat? I hope you never get it. I hope you're on the Supreme Court. That's exactly where you should. And I hope that the American people will see through this charade. And I wish you well. And I intend to vote for you. And I hope everybody who's fair-minded will.
I'll tell you what, the Senate,
Drop mic.
definitely a sexual chocolate moment. The Senate performance yesterday, the performance of these senators, I mean, it's been like this for some time, and including in this hearing, but I mean, was Dennis Miller's long ago description of Congress as a bunch of mediocre intellects Earl-shibed into looking somewhat consequential, was it ever more appropriate to apply than to the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday? The alternating repetitive statements, Democrats praising Ms. Ford as Susan B. Anthony and Republicans apologizing to Brett Kavanaugh, and just the two sides just repeating the same arguments over and over and over again for 9 hours. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Randy Barnett, Georgetown Law professor, author of the book Our Republican Constitution, Securing the Liberty and Sovereignty of We the People, Georgetown Law, where Mazie Hirano earned her J.D. What an embarrassment.
My condolences.
Yeah, well, that should be seen as an embarrassment to Georgetown Law. I'm not sure it will be. Randy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy.
So your reaction to Kavanaugh's performance, particularly amid the criticism he's receiving from the expected quarters, that his indignation and disgust for what he and his family have been put through displayed a temperament not befitting a Supreme Court justice.
Well, that's Rich. He saved his nomination with that performance. His nomination was going down after her performance, and he saved it. But he didn't save it alone. He saved it with the help of Senator Graham. If you want to look at it, one way you could look at it is Senator Graham would never have made that soliloquy if it hadn't been for Brett Kavanaugh's credible indignation. But on the other hand, the credible indignation was his alone. It was left to him to prove that he was innocent.
Yes.
The Republicans were not helping him do that, and the counsel they retained were not helping him do that. So it was like in volleyball. He's the one that put the ball in the air, and Lindsey Graham's the one that spiked it home.
Nice. Well, and he was not only fighting for a spot on the Supreme Court. He was fighting to keep his current job. Correct?
Yeah. Well, this is a canard. This is a job interview, and this is not a criminal trial, and therefore none of the rules apply. That's actually pretty ridiculous. He's being charged with criminal conduct. Mm-hmm. We have a system for assessing criminal charges because the charge is so serious. Sometimes the consequence is jail, sometimes the consequence is not jail, sometimes the consequence is a fine, sometimes the consequence is probation, and none of that sort of thing. It's the charge that's serious, and we have a system that's developed over centuries in order to weigh charges that serious. Charges that you have breached the normal civility that every citizen owes another citizen. You have breached your fundamental duty to the community. We have a system for that, and that system has rules. And one of those rules is the presumption of innocence. When I was on felony review in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, one of my jobs was to evaluate cases to see whether a charge should be brought. And I learned early on not to trust my gut reaction to the credibility of the witnesses who were talking to me, because they all sounded credible. Many of them sounded credible, and sometimes people who sounded incredible were still telling the truth. So the only way to make that judgment was based on corroborating evidence. If I saw, there was a moment or two when I did decide based on gut, but that was very rare. I based on corroborating evidence. That's the only way. I try to approach it like a judge, not like somebody who is a juror looking at the credibility of a particular person. Anyway, because of that, I waited for this hearing. I did not tweet about this case. I did no media. This is the first media I've done on this case. Because of the nature of the charge, I now needed to hear I needed to see the things unfold and see what corroboration there was. And not only was the charge uncorroborated in a way you'd require in a criminal proceeding, but it was contradicted by the people she said were the witnesses to it. And his calendar was affirmative corroboration of his story about how he spent his summer and what kind of person he was during that summer. Yes. That wasn't much to go by. But it's all we had. And the charge that he was a criminal was simply not sustained as it needed to be.
And so how did you find the performance and the questions from the lawyers on the panel? Former state attorneys general Blumenthal and Harris, a prosecutor in White House, Hirano, as I mentioned, J.D. from Georgetown. How did you find the lawyers?
Well, as much as Judge Kavanaugh is being criticized for lack of judicial restraint, he exercised remarkable restraint in the case of Senator Blumenthal, who had the nerve to say to him that a lie in one thing is a lie in everything. Yeah. This is the man who lied about his service in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That he didn't have. He served in Vietnam and he didn't. I mean, coming from a guy like that, that was remarkable restraint, not to point out the character flaws of each of the people that were professing them to be holier than he was.
But the dark side of me wanted him to do that so bad, to say to Senator Blumenfeld, well, how was your time in Vietnam?
Or Senator Booker, claimed that he had actually fondled and molested somebody when he was younger. He himself claimed that in a story he told about himself. So anyway, look, he didn't do that. He did what he did. He was a human being. He actually acted like a human being. That's really what saved his nomination, was the fact that he was a human being. He was not a robot. He was not somebody who would just, take a punch and not do anything about it. I mean, one of the things that the White House was looking for this time in nominees, and last time as well with Gorsuch, was somebody who not only had the right views, but had the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing in the face of political pressure.
Yeah.
That's what they were looking for. I didn't know for sure if they actually had found that in Brett Kavanaugh. I'm reasonably sure they did now.
I want to go back to something you sort of insinuated in passing, but the performance of Rachel Mitchell, the sex crimes prosecutor from Maricopa County that the Republicans tabbed to question Ms. Ford during her testimony. Do you think that turned out to be the right decision? How would you assess the job that she did?
I have a very mixed review of this. There's an upside and a downside. Let me take the downside first. It's Alan Dershowitz, my former professor, said correctly last night that prosecutors are not very, and he's not alone in saying prosecutors are not really great at cross-examination because they don't get to cross-examine very often. I was a prosecutor. My single biggest failure as a professional in my entire professional life was the first time I had to cross-examine a defendant in a criminal jury trial. I did not do a good job. In fact, I did the opposite. I did a terrible job. We won the case anyway, which shows how much it mattered. But it wasn't until I got to cross-examine months later that I got to vindicate myself and show I could do it. But that's how long it took to do it again. So she was not a very good cross-examiner, and there were things she could have cross-examined about.
Like what?
So that was bad.
Such as what?
I don't really want to go into it. Well, for example, how long did she know him? On what basis did she know him? She claimed to be able to make a positive ID. No details about that. The fact that she left the party, she left her girlfriend behind in a party with rapists, supposedly, and didn't think about her at all. How did she get home? How did she get there? All the rest of it. But I don't want to go into that. I mean, but here's what. So prosecutors are good at building cases. They're not good at tearing cases down, which is what cross-examination requires. On the other hand, she did build a case. She did what prosecutors do. She built a case. She built a case about the Democratic senators' foreknowledge of this information, what the timetable of that foreknowledge was, and that, as you will notice, became the mantra of the senators. When I heard Lindsey Graham in the hallway in between sessions before he made this speech, and he was asked by the press, how do you think she did? He said, she asked the questions I hoped she would ask. And basically, the question she asked was about how the Democrats had concealed these facts from them and from the American people until they decided to spring them on in the last moment. And that was what it took I think that is what it took to convince the last Republican senators who were holding out that this was actually a travesty.
Well, I think
so she actually accomplished maybe what it took to convince the jury of Republican senators that they needed to stand together.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, because that was what was used for much of the questioning of Kavanaugh, the back and forth between Republican and Democrat senators in terms of, you say FBI investigation, I say you had your chance, and it was that back and forth for 4 hours. That's a very good point. All right,
and she's the one that nailed down the timetable. With great detail.
Yeah, you're right. She does deserve credit for that. I agree with that. That's a good insight, and that's why you're a Georgetown Law professor. Randy Barnett, Georgetown Law professor, author of the book Our Republican Constitution: Securing the Liberty and Sovereignty of We the People. Randy, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
I hope to talk to you next time under happier circumstances.
Yes, us too. So. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.